Hello everyone, welcome to Game of the Day from this Bilbao Tournament 2016. I'm Grandmaster David Smurden from Australia, and we're looking at round 4 today, which had one decisive result and 2 draws, so no surprise, we're going for the big 1-0 for our Game of the Day, courtesy of Magnus Carlsen on the winning side and poor Wesley, so the unlucky one. It was actually a very interesting game, a short game, the shortest round in total that we've had so far in this tournament, and all the games had a little bit of something to them. The game between Karjakin-Nakamura and Giri was very interesting, ended in a draw, but the Dutchman had some excellent chances early on. The game between Wei Yi and Karjakin was a little bit of a non-starter, ending in a draw between the two players who are both licking their wounds a little bit so far in this event. But the champagne clash was between the world champion and Wesley. So Magnus Carlsen seems to have really hit his stride since losing that first game with the white pieces against Karjakin-Nakamura. He's won 3 in a row, and in this scoring system, with 3 points for a win and 1 for a draw, that's enough to catapult him way to the top of the table on 9 points out of 12, even though there's been 4 rounds. Okay, let's get into it then. So Carlsen with the white pieces. We saw a Berlin, well, an attempted Berlin appear on the board here with knight f6. There are various ways to decline taking on the main line of the Berlin, which is, of course, one of the main battlegrounds in opening theory these days. Not everyone's favorite opening system, let's be honest. But one of the ways of declining the Berlin is to play this move d3. It looks like such an innocuous, harmless little move, but actually of all the anti-Berlin systems that white can employ, I believe that it's probably the most promising. It was used a couple of years ago by Yi, one of the top Chinese grandmasters, to beat Vladimir Kramnik in a very rich Qatar Open and to win first prize. And since then, I've studied it a little bit. My co-commentator, Ronan, was a little bit surprised when I said that I'd actually studied this line, because he sort of said, why would you? But there's actually the subtleties, annoyances can prove to be quite dangerous for black if he doesn't know what he's doing. And one of the main reasons for this is that white keeps a lot of pieces on the board, gets an interesting structural position where he's got plenty of different plans at his disposal. Basically, it's the perfect position for someone like Magnus Carlsen to play for a win, using his superior intuition and positional understanding. That all sounds very vague for the moment. Let me try and explain more concretely by using this game as an example. In this position after bishop c5, white plays a bit of a strange voluntary capture here. Bishop takes c6, d takes c6. It looks like an exchange Spanish where black's managed to avoid playing the move a7, a6, and has got 2 developing moves in instead with knight f6 and bishop c5. Now you'd think on the surface that this would be good for black, but here's where we start getting into the deep stuff. Actually, this is an improved version of the exchange Spanish for white. One of the reasons is that this knight on f6 is actually not that well placed in its structure. Typically speaking, it will go to e7 in the exchange Lopez. Also, the bishop on c5 looks like it's in an active spot, but it's actually going to be a bit of a target. Both of these moves here don't do anything to protect the e5 pawn, which is going to be a common weakness, and black's actually going to have to lose the extra time that he seems to have gained from developing to try and cover this e5 pawn. That's usually how things work. And of course, black lacks a bit of flexibility on the queen side now with the doubled pawns. And in this closed structure with the pawn on d3, it's pretty much impossible for him to make anything of his bishop pair advantage in the short run. Now, that's a very broad overview of this structure, but we'll get a little bit into what white's main plans are a little bit later. So this was an interesting moment when bishop g4 was played. Typically speaking, the top players on the black side, the experts such as Anand and Kramnik, don't tend to play the bishop g4 systems. They tend to either keep it back on c8, or they would have done a bit of work to defend the e5 pawn by playing bishop to d6 voluntarily so that it can sit in on